serious.
Okay, I can do it.
Okay, good. And then turn to face each other.
What? Oh. What do they do? What do they do in the boxing?
Let's do get ready to fight.
Actually, I like more. On the southpaw. Good afternoon and welcome back to another episode of our growing podcast. My name is Rory Kegan and I'm here with the best partner a guy could ever hope for,
shucks.
Nicholas Schweitzer.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, we're here on location this week in front of our 5x5 SuperRoom.
Yeah, and so last podcast we kind of talked about what you need to do to maximize a harvest in a small space. And although I wouldn't necessarily call a 5x5 grow tent a small space, we did say that we were going to kind of take the camera up from our normal seating position and get in front of the systems and kind of break down what makes a great compact grow room. One of the ways you can set up a room in a house is the old school traditional way, which is really where these grow tents start to shine and you start to realize what an amazing invention and an amazing product these are. Because typically what you have to do to get a grow room in your house is really kind of dismantle your house. And you have to do things like, well, I've got hooks in the ceiling right up here. You put hooks in the ceiling.
Put up false walls.
You have to put false walls. You have to do all sorts of things that you really probably don't want to do to the house, even if you own it. And if you rent it, well, you definitely don't want to do that stuff to your house. And so I guess let's start off by talking about what this is, the grow tent, to the overall system, which is kind of the main structure of it.
Yeah, I'm really happy we're talking about this subject because, grow tent kits have definitely risen in popularity in recent years. And when you're shopping for them, it's really not exactly clear what you're getting or what you need. A lot of the product pictures that you see on places like Amazon or on e-com sites or sites like ours, it's just a component. And chances are, if you're in the market for all of these things, you're not even sure exactly what function each one of these things pictured does, right? So it makes it really difficult to know what's a quality system and what's not, right? And then if you look at something like this, you can see that it's quality, right? But by far and large, you're looking at kind of an empty space, right? With how low profile these lights are, you can barely really see it there. So it's like, what are the operative and important things in this grow room that are going to make it good value and help me get the most out of my grows at home? So like you said, starting with the grow tent, really that is the foundational piece that's going to house everything else.
Yeah. And again, like I said in those videos that you might see on our website, when I kind of introduce you to the 5x5 tent or the Superflower cabinet, what's great about these systems is this is it, right? This is the whole system that you need to grow these amazing, big, bountiful harvests inside of this little 5x5 box, right? And this thing can kind of sit off in the corner of your garage. Again, you don't need holes in ceilings or anything else. And this is it. This is the structure that maintains the environment inside for the plants. This is the structure that blocks the light from getting out to the rest of the room or out windows where neighbors can see. This is the structure that holds your carbon filters and your light. This structure basically houses it all and is the grow room where everything else is kind of situated inside and going on. And so, like I said, this is an amazing invention. This simplified growing so much. It's, I think we kind of take grow tents for granted these days because they've been around for, a long time, but it's these simplify things so much. Not only can you put them up in, I think I could build this tent in probably 10 minutes. I couldn't hang all the components in it, but I could build it in 10 minutes. And the great thing is if you ever take a break or say you had a landlord that was going to walk through, you could take this tent down in probably just as quick a time and you can store it off in the corner. There is one thing that I kind of want to say when we go into talking about grow rooms. We do not condone anybody grow any kind of illegal plants if your state does not allow it. We only recommend that you grow in states where cannabis is been legalized for medical or recreational. We want to stress that component. But sometimes, you know, when you rent a house, sometimes landlords don't really care for it, even if it is in a legal state. Being able to take this down, store it when you're not using it, put it back up, it's amazingly convenient.
Oh yeah. I mean, prior to that, it was a full renovation project.
Right.
And there's no going back from it. I mean, once you put something like that, you're literally like having to tear the whole room apart if you want to reverse it. And we actually, you know, we lived through those years where people were doing that. You get that call and it's like, now you got to tear down the entire garage.
Yeah.
And those projects weren't fun. So
Yeah.
this put an end to all of that. And so there's a lot of options out there for grow tents now. It's like, great, we have grow tents now, so cool. They're all the same. But that couldn't be further from the truth, right? And so, you know, when you look at grow tents, a lot of them are very well advertised online. They very much look the same. They all have the entry ports, are the same size. You know, obviously there's some blatant things that separate Gorilla, like the additional height that you're going to get. As a new grower, you may not realize how important that is. But, you know, I can understand that as a consumer that is just getting into gardening, you know, you may look at these and say, they're all the same. But that really couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, we've just talked about how this is foundational, right? So if you're growing at home, how often are you going to be checking in on your grow if you want to be doing it right?
I mean, at least every single day.
At least every single day.
At least once a day. But the thing is when you're a young grower and when you're a seasoned veteran grower, it's fun to look at your garden, right?
You want to look at them more than you have to.
Right, yeah. So the amount of time you're actually going to go in and you're going to peek at that garden is quite a bit, right? Yeah. And so when you're coming into your garage and you're unzipping and zipping and unzipping and zipping and unzipping and zipping, it's going to wear on those zippers. That's
my point,
right?
Exactly. You are going to be opening this thing more times in a day than you're even, you know, you would think, right? And so it's gonna get a ton of use.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important that all of these enclosures, the zippers, the gauge of those zippers, the thickness of the fabric, you know, even the stitching on it, those things are so important. And you wouldn't even necessarily think about that as you're making that purchase, right?
Yeah, and I mean, look, this is the whole reason why we started Gorilla Grow Tent, was I had used so many different tent brands over the years, pretty much every one that you could name at that time, which was around that 2010 time frame. And every single one of them that I had ever used failed within probably, I mean, I'm thinking the longest one I ever had before it failed was maybe 6 months.
Oh, they were disposable.
Yeah, they were disposable, right. And so, I mean, it's like every little design aspect that we put in these tents was all based on that experience, right? And so you are right, when you're looking at an Amazon listing, it looks like a black box, right? They're all black, they're all fabric, they all have the same pole structure. They all have relatively the same thing going on inside, but the construction details of those tents, I can tell you, are night and day. You know, we were the first company to come out with the 1680D fabric. So that has a couple advantages. You know, as you're moving around your tent with, you know, tools and, you know, equipment and everything else, these things get a lot of scuff. You know, on the sides, they get a lot of scuff. And I have been maneuvering around a tent actually with my mountain bike and torn a hole right in the side of the tent because the thing was paper thin. You know, it was like my handlebar was the only thing that caught it, and it ripped a huge vertical strip right off the side of it. And that was just me bringing my bike in and putting it next to it, right? I mean, garages can get crowded, everybody's are dirty, and so it's like this thing had to put up with, you know, me bumping into it all the time, which is why we chose that thicker fabric.
I mean, even if you're not running things in tight spaces outside of the tent like a bike, like just your grow equipment, whether it's your trimming shears or anything like that, like you're gonna be in this thing moving around, and any kind of wrong turn with your arm or turn around, you're going to be slicing right through that.
Yeah. You know, and then one of the big ones is really the height adjustability. And this is one that continues even to this day to separate us from all the competitors who have tried to chase us and tried to follow in our footprint as far as the features that they offer in their grow tents. So this grow tent right now is at its lowest level that you can possibly get it, which is 6'11". This is without the extension kit in, which we do offer a 12-inch extension kit in the box with each OG Gorilla Grow tent, which is our original line. And the reason why we wanted to go higher, this was one of the biggest pain points when I was a grower. You know, most of the grow tents that I was growing in back in the day they came stock at about 6 feet tall, right? So this is even taller than that at its lowest level. And when you have all of this stuff in here, right? We've got a carbon filter in the back, which is taking up space. We have a grow light that is by far slimmer than they've ever been, right? Back in the day, I mean, we had hoods, air-cooled hoods that were about, 16 inches high that were hanging from the ceiling. You know, you've got these yo-yos that are also creating, some space up there. You've got the pots, and what you ended up with was this really short amount of space to grow. So you had this 6-foot tent, a bunch of space wasted up top, a bunch of space wasted at the bottom, which was critical. I mean, you couldn't get away from that, right? You have to have equipment. And what you'd end up with is this really small grow space.
And that's another thing that you don't really see when you're shopping online.
Right.
You see a 6'10", you're like, cool, I've got 6 feet of grow space. You don't realize how much necessary room these fixtures take up. Not to mention the heat that's produced from the light, with the lights from back in the day, the recommended hanging height of those.
Zone.
You need that buffer zone. And you also, heat rises, right? So if your tent's not tall enough, you're gonna have that heat all sitting right in that precious grow space, right at the canopy, where it's gonna be detrimental to your grow.
Yeah.
So even if you're not growing plants that are gonna be up to the ceiling, just the fact that you have that extra space up there where the heat can sit away from your ideal temperatures and environment on the plant is super valuable to the results you're getting.
Yeah, well, the tallest of our tents when we first came out, I mean, a lot of people were like, this is the first tent I've ever been able to grow with a double-ended fixture because of that theory, right?
Yep,
Because heat rose, it could rise high enough to get away from that plant canopy, and that's where your carbon filter is anyway, right? So it's pulling all that air from that little hot pocket that's up top and getting it outside of the tent. So really, revolutionizing the adjustability and height on these tents was really big and still is. Again, we do offer a 1-foot extension kit, so that would go up to 7'11", and then we also sell separate 2-foot extension kits, so that would take you up to 8'11". And then we have seen, but don't really recommend, putting multiple extension kits in to get up to 9'11". We've seen a 10 by 20 that was at 10'11", so 11 foot tall. This tent was 10 by 20 by 11 feet tall. The thing was massive. In fact, I think we maybe did that at a trade show.
Yep.
We were giving the wrong message to our customer
Needed
base.
a ladder.
And so, so you can really gain a lot of increased grow height in here, because at the end of the day, that's a lot of people want to grow monster plants, We don't want to be in these confined spaces, which obviously we can be productive in those confined spaces with gardens. But a lot of people want to grow trees. And so that allows you to do that. In fact, it allows you to do it on the fly. I have seen people start flowering without the extension kit in. They get into trouble, they veg too long, and then they actually take this off, add the extension kit in, which, keep in mind, you have to deal with all the equipment on the ceiling to do that, but it can be done.
It's oh shit protection.
I
was just going to say, in a previous episode, we talked about if you don't flip to at the right time in a small space, your whole grow is pooch. So there's built-in protection here. We do get a lot of people coming back and buying that extension kit when it's the oh shit purchase. I'm growing in too tall, and then you can really save your efforts from the last month and a half. So, another thing that I wanted to mention is, what allows us to grow to that height is the thickness of these poles and of the frame, the sturdiness of the frame in general. All steel interlocking from top to bottom, corner to corner, right? We mentioned that there's going to be a lot of traffic in this thing. And so, when you're unzipping and zipping and you're moving around in here and you bump the side or a bike hits the outside, this thing is going to be moving a little bit, right? And the last thing you want is a flimsy tent that's going to be susceptible to having heavy weight on the top. You start to put a little sideways pressure on that or front to back, and that whole thing is going to come down.
Yeah, I had plastic corners back in the day actually break. And it wasn't because of a ton of force. They were just flimsy, they were cheap. And so that's really what led us to go with the all steel design. All of our corners are steel, all of the crossbars are steel. There's no plastic in any of the framing in this tent. And it really does make a rock solid foundation for the rest of all this stuff to sit on and all this equipment to hang. LED lights these days, they're big, they're heavy. Carbon filters,
Carbon
they're
filters,
filled with
the
carbon. You can't get a light carbon filter, you know? And so all of this stuff adds up. And, you know, that was one of the iconic images from when we first started. It was you, me, and our other business partner hanging from the top of the tent. I mean, that was a solid 500 plus pounds.
I don't think we realized how powerful that image was going to be.
Yeah, for sure.
Messing around.
And we just recreated it. I'm sure you guys have seen the video, you know, of me and two of my coworkers hanging from it. We wanted to recreate it on camera because we've gotten over the years, like, is this image real? Like, I think it's fake.
That's the thing.
Like,
Competitors
no,
have photoshopped that image because they can't do it.
Right.
You know, there was one where like, oh, they, you know, I guess it's stronger now. But then when you look closely, you know, you could see the Photoshop lines. It could have been in one of those like bad Photoshop, you know, listings that you see, or blogs that you see. They're pretty funny.
And so, you know, every other part of this tent kind of has that same design ethos, right? I mean, it's like every little piece of the tent, we wanted to make it the strongest we could, the tallest we could,
and the most functional.
And the most functional that we could.
Yeah.
You know, even to where we started putting all of the ducting ports, right? I mean, funny enough, as we've moved forward in, you know, in lighting design, some of these ducting ports are obviously just bonuses in the tent now, because we don't use as much air-cooled equipment as we used to, because thankfully LEDs do run a little bit cooler just because they're not pulling as much wattage, right?
Yep.
I mean, don't be fooled. They don't run, you know, they're not heatless, but they really have cooled down the whole entire tent. And so we don't need as much equipment, but you know, all those ducting ports are still there for you to use.
Better to have too many than not enough.
Agreed.
And you know, while we're talking about the ducting ports, when you're talking about a light deprivation tent, you want to make sure that there are no light leaks, right? Which is part of why the canvas being as thick as it is important. These light sealing flaps that we have over all of the zippers. And then on the ducting ports, these are all double cinching, and this isn't something that you really readily see or understand the importance of when you're looking online, but you've got a flap on the inside here to hug the ducting port and on the outside, right? So you can run this through, cinch it on the outside of the tent and cinch it on the inside, and there's absolutely no way that any light is going to get through there.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I guess just to end on what we originally started talking about at the beginning, which was those zippers that you're zipping, unzipping, zipping, unzipping. We have the most industrial zipper in all of the industry. You know, I have some Gorilla tents that are nearing 10 years old that I have been in consistent use with, and they continue to zip perfectly every single time.
I mean, I could do this till my arm falls off.
Yes. And so, you know, so that zipper is like the strongest that you can possibly get on there. It will hold up to the test of time. And there are tricks and, you know, tricks and tips on how to unzip and rezip your tent without putting added stress on it, because this is a lot of material hanging off a tent. It's not easy to design something that can put up with that abuse, which is what we've done. But so, you know, there are, you know, with grow tents, you know, you need to care for them properly. And if you do, they will last you literally a lifetime. I mean, again, I've got a tent that's 10 years old that I have not yet blown a zipper on. That's amazing. I mean, it amazes me. And I'm the one that, you know, put my heart and soul into creating such a, you know, robust product. And even I'm kind of like, wow, that thing's lasted.
He's reprimanding me for what I just did with the zipper. That's his way of representing.
That's what it's built for.
Right. No, absolutely. Yeah, you know, and then the other nice features that we have on here are these micro mesh filters. You know, sometimes you want to open up a little bit more airflow. You can kind of regulate the temperature a little bit that way. And these little portholes down here allow you to do that, get some of the outside environment in there without the risk of having any kind of bugs or any other unwanted pathogens get into your tent.
Yeah, so I mean, let's segue into the airflow, since that's what you just mentioned,
Sure.
Which is all these micro mesh openings. So, you know, any grow room is going to need, and I said this in the last episode, but any grow room is going to need kind of two forms of airflow. Unless it's a closed loop room, which you rarely see in tents. So one, you're gonna kind of need that pass-through airflow, where you're pulling air out of the tent, which is gonna be hot, usually pretty moist air that's being created from the grow light. doing its thing. That's where the heat's going to come from. And then, you know, the water that you're putting into the medium of the plants and also the plants breathing is going to create that moisture or that humidity. And so what you typically want to do is pull that warm, moist air out of the tent and have it passively return. And so that's what these micro mesh ports on the bottom are for, is for being able to open them up and let passive, cool, little bit drier air actually return into the tent to refresh so that you don't get to critical levels of heat and you don't get to critical levels of humidity. That's one way to do it. If you're concerned about light coming out of the tent, because when you open those, you will see light escape from the tent. Some people, doesn't matter, it's in their garage. They're not gonna, you know, neighbors aren't gonna see it, or they don't have sunlight coming in, so it doesn't really matter. You can also add passive air return through the same carbon filter setup that is just on the outside of your tent pushing air in, and then that air that's being pushed in is what's replacing the air being pulled out by that carbon filter. So that is two ways to go about it. All of our rooms come with a single standard carbon filter, because typically we find people don't need that carbon air passive return, and they will just use the micro mesh vents. And then the other type of airflow is actually what would be mimicking wind in nature, which is a clip-on fan that we don't have in this setup, but they're fans that would clip onto these poles and actually create a breeze that goes over the plants.
Yep. And it helps move the air around. It helps strengthen their stalks, the foundation of them, right?
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, in nature, you know, there's always a breeze in nature. It will help strengthen stalks to kind of prepare the plant for having bigger flowers. It can disrupt bugs, you know, from colonizing too much. Bugs don't usually typically like wind, especially when they're flying bugs. So it can help control bug populations. And it just keeps things moving around the tent. You know, sometimes when you have thick canopy, you can get, pockets of humidity that kind of hang out inside of that thick canopy. So that wind that blows on it kind of just refreshes all that stagnant air that's within the canopy and kind of keeps everything moving and just keeps everything nice and fresh.
Should we talk a little bit about the balance of air from the outside to the in, and if you have too much negative air pressure?
Yeah, that would be great, because it's something that we see quite a bit.
Yeah.
So when you have a grow tent like this, when this tent is zipped up, if there is no other either ducting ports that Rory was just showing or the micro mesh vents, you only have air that's able to return really through the zipper teeth, which is not a huge volume of air. So if you put a large carbon filter like this with this one has a 6-inch inline fan in it, which pulls quite a bit of air out of this tent. If you don't have any other way for air to get in this tent except through the zipper teeth, which again is not a large volume of air, what you are going to create inside this tent is basically a vacuum chamber. We've seen it time after time. I can't really fault our customers. Sometimes they just don't know really what they're doing, or they haven't looked through our whole instruction manual, or they haven't called our grow experts that are at their every disposal to answer their grow questions. And what happens is their tents start to suck in, because it is creating a vacuum, because that fan is pulling far more air than is actually being able to return through the teeth of these zippers, and causes a vacuum. What happens is the whole tent starts to push in, and it will sometimes grab these poles and try to suck them in, and it could be bad. It could be bad. And that will happen I don't care if these poles were made out of solid steel, it would still happen, because vacuum is a very strong force, especially when the air being pulled by that is probably 20 times or more the amount of air that's being returned. So, easy fix, right? All you have to do is open up one of those ducting ports, open up one of those mesh screen ports, or put something else that's pumping air in, like the carbon filter fan combo, that's returning as much air as that is pulling. So what you ultimately want in the tent is not negative air pressure, which we just described. Another version of that would be if you had this fan on low or not on at all. You had a carbon filter and fan on the outside of the tent that was pushing more air in than that was escaping. And now you have what's called positive pressure. And what happens then? Your tent blows up like a balloon, right? So that's not good either.
Funny, not funny.
Funny, not funny. And actually some breeders do use the positive pressure to control any pollen getting in from other tents.
Yep.
So positive pressure can work in your advantage. It's not nearly as dangerous because positive pressure is not going to put any pressure on these poles. So there won't be any cause for alarm in terms of like a collapse or anything like that, which negative pressure can cause. And so what you're actually looking for is neutral pressure. So neutral pressure would be the same amount of air that's being evacuated out of the tent is the same amount of air that is being returned into the tent. And when you have neutral air pressure, your tent will look like this. You'll be able to walk around. It won't be sucking in. It won't be blowing out from positive pressure. It will look like there's really no pressure at all. And that's why we call it neutral air pressure. And so that's ultimately what you're looking for in your tent. Another quick tip would be if you have a carbon filter on the right side of your tent that's actually pulling air out, it would be good if you had any choice of the micro mesh filters to open one on the left side of the tent, right? And that way you're getting air that's kind of moving through the entirety of the tent. You've already got the bottom to top action going on, and then you'd also get the left to right action going on so that you can get as much of that stale air out. If you had that carbon filter on the ground and that was open, well, now you would have a bunch of stale air at the top of the tent. And so it's good to kind of see where you're pulling air out from and return it to the opposite side of the tent.
Maximize the airflow there. You know, that's an extreme example we just gave of the whole tent sucking in on itself and collapsing. But you know, it's not uncommon to have a little bit of negative air pressure, right? And we do have an accessory that helps resolve that. We have the high CFM kit, which kind of, you go from pole to pole, and even if you have a little bit of negative air pressure, it'll keep those tent walls secure and where you want them, and not puffing in on you.
Negative air pressure is by far the most common.
Yep.
You know, finding neutral, the neutral zone is kind of a little bit tough. And so a little bit of negative pressure isn't bad. In fact, a little bit of negative pressure is what's going to create a completely smell-free environment, right? If you have negative pressure, that means that everything that's actually escaping the tent is going through the carbon filter and out. So having a little bit of negative pressure is always, you know, a good thing. Neutral pressure is going to be about the same. You're probably not going to get any air escaping except for out of the carbon filter. If you have positive pressure, you will have smell coming out of your tent. 100%.
That makes sense.
It's going to be pushing through the, you know, the zipper teeth. It's going to be pushing through wherever it can, and you will get a little bit of smell. And yeah, the high CFM kit that we sell is a pole that clips onto these vertical poles, and it's a horizontal pole that goes all the way across the whole part of the tent and kind of holds those walls from being sucked in, and kind of, you know, when that happens, it takes valuable growing space away from the overall square footage.
Yep. Simple but effective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, so now that we've gone on about Gorilla forever.
Okay. All right, look, we've kind of talked about Gorilla ad nauseum, and this is starting to turn into, you know, our trade show pitch, which is not our intention, right? Like, really, we're just trying to explain.
We're just so natural. It's just
why
flows.
Gorilla Grow Tent exists and what made it rise to the prominence and popularity that it has today. And these are the defining features of it. You know, just real quick, I'd be remiss
One
if I
more
didn't,
point.
I have to. It's here, the flood pool. Like, when we were handling customer service for other tents, when we were using them back in the day for Super Closet, the flood pools on these other tents didn't pool floods. And so you talk about destroying a room, you know, Nick mentioned the convenience of grow tents and how they allow you to avoid destroying a whole room in your house so that you could grow. Well, if the flood pool doesn't work and you have an accident, it kind of negates all those benefits, because what'd you do? You just ruined that space in your house. So our flood pool actually pools floods. Okay, last feature, and my favorite, the tool pouch. This tool pouch is super convenient. It's so convenient. You could put your trimming shears in there, your TDS pen.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's so sturdy on the Gorilla Grow Tent that I can actually fit inside there. And I do. I jump in like a little baby kangaroo and I sit there and I watch my grow sometimes. So that's all I got to say about the Gorilla Grow Tent. You have anything else you want to add?
No, I feel like I'm at MJ Biz right now. Giving
I
the
know,
full
dude.
shakedown pitch.
We just lost our last viewer. Huh?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So then let's talk about the other things.
So we love our grow tents.
Then
We know that's been made apparent.
You can't fault us for
Yeah.
that. Let's talk about the other things that make a premium grow room premium and how it's going to affect your growing experience. I think a big one, especially with a lot of these packages I see out there, they put energy and attention into all these other components, but they neglect the light.
Yep. Yeah, in some of the packages, and especially on Amazon, you have to be really careful about because a lot of them have these lights that look like they're way higher wattage or way higher power, because a lot of people are still using that HID equivalent, which we used to do back in the day with the XL1000, the XL750. We have since ditched that theory just because it really doesn't make sense anymore, because these lights do way more than a 1,000-watt light ever dreamt of doing. But a lot of these lights still look like they're, they say like 2,000 watt, and it's like you think that that's the full energy that they're using, and then you look at it and it says like 300 watt, right? And so you do have to be careful about the light that you get with these tent systems. Again, most of the lights that you're going to get out there these days are probably just your standard white light LED, which are not going to be efficient in any form or fashion for actually doing what they're supposed to do, which is grow the plants inside the tent. And so that's why all of our super rooms come with our X2 or X squared, I should say. I always revert back.
Too.
I know.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's big.
It's
and that's
square.
And so this is our flagship light. This is the light that we use in all the commercial facilities that we outfit. This is a light that I've been using for many, many years. It is an absolute powerhouse, and it is more than enough light to fill this entire tent.
Oh yeah, and it utilizes our targeted full spectrum. So it's giving your plants exactly what they need at every stage of growth and nothing that they don't want. And so when you see a PPF reading on this light, that's 100% utilizable PPF for the plant's grow. So a lot of these PPF readings you see on some of these white light fixtures out there, or all the white light fixtures, quite frankly, it's misleading because it might be high as far as a rating, but the plant's not using those photons at all. So it really doesn't mean anything.
Meaningless number.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and one of the great things, not to go back to the grow tent again, but one of the great things about grow tents is the fact that they are a fully enclosed 360-degree space. And so this mylar that's on the walls is really good at reflecting photons back down to the plants. So LEDs typically have a 120-degree angle at which they cast light, which means that they're going to be casting light out of their outer edges going this way. And when you're surrounded by reflective walls, what's going to happen is those photons are going to be redirected right back down to the plant canopy. And so this light, we typically in open space say it's got a 4x4 footprint. That's 4x4 of very good, very intense, high usable light levels. But if you put it inside of a tent, this is a 5x5 tent, it easily extends that footprint to a 5x5 and possibly even bigger, because you do have these reflective walls basically acting as this gigantic reflector to pull those photons that are being escaped from the sides right back down to the plant canopy. So this light will light up this 5x5 from edge to edge with really strong, nice, usable light.
Oh yeah, the Gorilla Grow Tent interior walls reflect photons with a vengeance.
And can you see it's got our logo
especially
printed inside?
Yeah, I was gonna say, especially the part that has the logo and the gorilla face. You're like getting double the reflection.
Have we shown you the tag?
Oh yeah, the tag is super dope. Look at that.
If your grow tent doesn't have a fashionable tag, it's not worth a damn.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah 4 out of 5 dentists agree. Yeah, get in close on that. Sick. So anyway, the light can't be an afterthought. And so, there's some tent kits out there. They have some nice things going for them. There's some automation there and some cohesion with the components. But like the light's an afterthought. I mean, it literally just looks like an aluminum plate with LED strip lights on it.
Yeah.
And people are buying it up, right? And so it's your grow is only going to be as good as that light. And so again, it absolutely can't be an afterthought. It has to be a centerpiece. Otherwise, you're never going to be happy with your results.
It is probably the most important piece of equipment in an entire system. There's, you know, a lot of lights out there that just have a lot of shortcomings, either in terms of power or, like we said, spectrum. So you have to do your research on lights. You have to look at the spectrum, make sure it's not a wasteful spectrum. Make sure the light is actually the size and the wattage that it looks like in the picture, because I've also seen pictures on Amazon where the light looks gigantic inside the tent, and then you actually look at the spec of the light versus the tent size, and it's not even a fraction of that. It's almost like they blew up the picture to make it look like it fit inside that tent.
Yep.
So there's a lot of false advertising out there, and you need to make sure that you're on top of knowing what exactly you're getting, because it's a super important thing.
Yeah, and so, I mean, those are the two biggest components and that are going to influence your grow the most. The enclosure that you're keeping it in, because your grow's only, you know, as solid as its house, and the light, of course. You know, another main operative factor is in nutrients, right? And so, you know, I'm not sure what's coming with a lot of these kits, but you know, if you're not using a premium nutrient and giving the plants what they need, both in terms of photons and in terms of their NPK, macros and micros, again, you're gonna get results, but they're not gonna, I don't think they're gonna be the results you hoped and dreamed of. It's certainly not gonna be a high time centerfold. Right?
Yeah. And I mean, I'm laughing because here we go, pulling this back into a sales pitch for Lotus Nutrients.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, all of our tent kits do come with another brand that we make, which is Lotus. And Lotus is by far the most premium powdered nutrient on the market. And I'll tell you what, typically when people are buying a kit like this, what are they looking for? They're looking for ease of growing, right? I mean, 100% of the time.
Yeah.
It's like they want something that's easy to put up, that it's easy to maintain. And so if you're looking for that ease, we have to do a sales pitch for Lotus, because that is Lotus's whole premise, is super simple, super easy to use. It's basically a 3-part recipe. It's grow, bloom, and boost. And we do have a CalMag that you can add in if you are growing in something like a cocoa substrate or something that requires a higher calcium and magnesium ratio. And it's just easy. It's like it's 1 or 2 scoops of this powder, you throw it in water, you mix it up and you water, and the results from just those few bottles is outstanding. Right? Back in the day, I had many bottles that were spilling all over the place, and they would get on the tent and they would, you know, leak out. Yeah, I mean, it was a mess. It was a complete mess. And so typically, if you're growing in a tent, you're looking for that simpler solution, and that's where Lotus would come in. You know, and then going from the nutrients to, you know, many different styles of actually growing in, you know, either cocoa medium, in soil medium, in hydroponic systems, which we also sell with these tents. That's all grower preference, right? I mean, it's like everybody has their particular style. If you're growing organic, you're always going to be in soil substrate of some sort. And then if you're using a more fertilizer salt-based system, which a lot of people do, then you can, you know, branch out into things like hydroponics, like cocoa, like rock wool slabs, or anything like that.
Yeah, that was very compelling. Do you have a business card? I'd like to speak with you after the show, if you don't mind. No,
yeah,
I mean,
did this become a sales pitch?
I mean, it's ridiculous how simple Lotus is. I mean, it really is. It's like after you've been through that experience with these 9 to 12 parts, and some of those I really liked, you know, they got good results. But I mean, the fact of the matter is that you got a measuring shot glass, you've got a measuring pint glass, and you're just like playing mad scientist in there, and you know, every single week doing that. Lotus is just like boom, doink, doink, feed, and then the rest of it's just, you know, drooling over your plants or getting on with the rest of your busy day, whatever. Right. So anyway, that, you know, I get those are the primary features. And then the other most important thing is, you know, what is the support that comes along with the system, right? Like, are you just gonna get a bunch of shit in a box and it's like, great, what do I do with this now? Oh, I gotta go on forums to figure out what this thing does, or there's directions that came with that individual component, but how do I put it all together to get the best out of that grow? Cool, you have all the components, but you don't really have the cohesion among them to know exactly what to do and set up a simple grow like you were talking about. And so that's the other great thing about growing with a company like ours, is that, you know, the resources that come along with it, the simplicity and the support that you get from us after the purchase is just, it can't be underestimated, right? Or overestimated, I should say. It can't be overestimated.
Yeah, from a lot of companies, you don't get that at all.
No.
There is no support. There is no person on the other end of the phone answering your questions. How do I set up this? What do I do at this stage? Hey, I just saw some leaf burn. What am I doing? You know, and it's like, we'll walk you through each one of those things. And other companies, there's no one there. There's, you know, yeah, if your product fails, there might be someone there if you're lucky, but they're surely not going to teach you how to grow. In fact, I don't even think most of them reside in the same country that you do. And so it's going to be really hard to get anybody on the phone to help you out.
Yeah, no, and I don't mean that to sound like a commercial, but it's just like it's such a nice thing that you've got all this stuff and you can just pick up the phone, or if you feel like chatting or writing an email, you've got somebody on the other end that is so intimately familiar with all this equipment that they could give you an answer in a second. So there's never any point in your grow where you'll feel like you're on an island or you don't know what to do next and you don't know who to ask, and now you've got to wade through 100 confusing and conflicting articles online. So it's a pleasure to have that resource available.
So what's that 1-800 number?
And that's 855 GGT Grow. That's GGT Grow. And leave off the last S for savings.
All right.
Yeah. I thought we were doing a podcast. Should I get in the tool pouch? No? Should I show people that?
Oh man, I don't know.
Should we get a shot of us on top of the grow tent? Like one of these up there.
That's the thumbnail he's talking about.
Okay. Anyway, if you want to know the best way to maximize your yields in a tight space and you don't feel like watching our previous podcast episode or any of the other videos we did on it, just get the 5x5 SuperRoom. That's how you maximize your yield in a tight space. In a one-word answer. Hey, how do you maximize your yield in tight space? The 5x5 SuperRoom. Done. Can we go now?
Gotta do an outro.
Did we mention the infrared blocking roof? I don't think we did. Cool heat signature. No worries, man. Anyway, thanks for tuning in today and bearing with us. As always, please like, subscribe, tell your friends, write a comment if you feel so inclined. Ding the bell, school's back in. We'll see you next time. Thank you.